Welcome.
All right, I'm going to bring our meeting to order. We've got a long agenda, so we're going to get started. Chair Dunnigan has been summoned to Business and Labor. He will be back when we get to his item, or we'll move it around. I'm going to start with a motion to approve the minutes. Senator Stevenson, your light is on to approve the minutes of October 11th, 2023. Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
Okay, that motion is before us. Is there any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of October 11th, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I'll rule that passes unanimously. The first item on our agenda, draft legislation, technical corrections on two committee bills previously approved. As you recall, we had two bills that were previously approved. We had to make some technical corrections, and it doesn't change the substance of the bill in any way. I'm going to go to Bob Reese, our drafting attorney and committee attorney, and he's going to give kind of an overview of. And there's two bills, so we're going to be looking for two different motions. And the bills are tax incentive revisions and Metro Township modifications, and we just need to have motions to approve those as committee bills. We already did that, but we need to do it with the technical corrections. So, Bob, I think I've got your mic on. Let's go to you.
Thank you. Robert Reeves, attorney with the Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel. As Senator McKell mentioned, the there are two bills that the committees previously adopted as committee bills, and after adoption, we had to make some technical corrections to fix cross-references and that kind of thing. So these bills are back before you in their former state, but with those technical corrections made. The one is tax incentive revisions. That's basically the bill that tightened up some reporting requirements on tax incentives and contained a requirement for an analysis to look at whether a development project would be likely to occur without the use of tax incentives. And then the second one is the Metro Township modifications bill, which basically does away with Metro Townships and requires and transforms the current Metro Townships into municipalities. And again, these are in substance the same bills you saw previously, but with some technical corrections to fix cross-references and so on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Robert. Are there questions to members of our committee about these technical changes? Okay, so I don't see any questions. I'm going to go to the public. Anybody from the public want to comment on these two items? Okay, seeing now, I'm going to close public comment. So the motion that I'd be looking for, again, these are bills that we have already adopted as committee bills. The motion would be to approve tax incentive revisions as a committee bill. Can I get somebody to make that motion on the first bill? You guys are quiet this morning. Let's go. All right, Representative Benyon.
So I make a motion to approve those changes.
Okay, so the first motion, let me just restate your motion and make sure this is the correct motion. First motion would be to approve tax incentive revisions as a committee bill. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there discussion to that motion? Okay, seeing none, back to the maker of the motion.
I'll waive.
Who waives? All those in favor of the motion to approve tax incentive revisions say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll rule that passes unanimously. The second bill, I'm going to go to Representative Cutler, would be Metro Township modifications. Representative Cutler.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd move that we adopt the Metro Township modifications with the technical changes suggested as a committee bill.
Perfect. That motion is before us. Is there discussion to that motion? Seeing none, back to the maker of the motion.
Waived.
He who waives. That motion is properly before us. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I'll rule that also passes unanimously. Okay, so item number 3 on our agenda, Representative Dunnigan obviously is up at Business and Labor. Item number 4, I don't know if Katie Hall came in. I know she is planning on presenting. Representative Cutler, you are next by default on item number 5. We've got your mic on. I'm going to turn that off, and both of the presenter mics are turned on. This is for draft legislation, conflict of interest, disclosures, modifications. At the end of this presentation, I know Representative Cutler is looking for a motion to approve the conflicts of interest disclosure modifications as a committee bill, and let's unless that's changed, but let's talk it through. Appreciate you being here prepared. Representative Cutler, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this opportunity. We'll try to get through this relatively quickly, especially if we have others return. We've been working on this bill around conflict of interest disclosures, and at one point we also talked about having the campaign finance reform be included in it. I wanted to give you an update on the progress we've made and ask for your support. There are two versions that are posted. The first we posted to meet the deadline and then made a couple of changes yesterday to update it. They're related to the bill's penalty provisions, which I'll explain here coming up. So just for those who are new, or for the public who missed this before, we have a lot of political subdivisions in the state, all who have requirements to disclose conflicts of interest. But often those conflict of interest disclosures get filed in a drawer, or they're technically publicly available, but not very transparent in some cases. The state has a great system for conflict of interest disclosures on disclosures.utah.gov that state officials use, and this bill is to allow political subdivisions to use that same software system that's already been developed, and in this case the elections office is looking at deploying a new version of that, and so as they deploy the new version, if it's financially and technically feasible, we will give access to political subdivisions and all public officials to do that. Now, that would help us improve transparency to make sure people are aware. It would make it easier for clerks to administer and easier for the candidates to, or I should change this and say the elected officials to file those. So what's new? When we got down to the brass tacks and put this into place with the drafting attorney, the bill does not change who files or who is required to disclose a conflict of interest. That is still the same. Every elected official and those appointed to certain boards have to disclose conflicts of interest. It doesn't change the fact that, as we discussed last time, many municipalities have additional requirements beyond the state requirements related to contracts or related to something unique that they feel is important. Those all would stay in place. What it does change is it changes where the conflict of interest disclosures would be filed, namely putting them on disclosure.utah.gov. And in addition to elected officials, it would add those who are on state land use authorities to make sure theirs are also transparent. And we feel that's important because those bodies are making land use decisions just like another political subdivision. There's only 3 of them, the Point of the Mountain Authority, the Inland Port, and the MIDA, the Military Land Use Authority. So they would be treated like other land use authorities, and their disclosures would be visible publicly just like others. The other thing it changes is now there would be a requirement to annually update your disclosure form. Currently, for some, you file them, but it's not clear how often. You're required, if you have a change, you're required to update it, but there's nothing that prompts you to update your conflict of interest. Like we have as state officials, you get prompted every January to update your conflict of interest disclosure. This would do the same thing for all elected officials around the state. Now, this is an eye chart and a little complicated, but we put this together to explain how challenging it is when you look at the county officials, municipal officials, school districts, special districts, etc. There are, you can see there's civil penalties today and there are criminal penalties, and there's a wide variety of who enforces those, and the statute in many cases is not clear, and we think that while we don't necessarily have a problem with this today, because some of the things are so unclear about who has responsibility to report or to enforce, often things don't happen unless it's very, very serious. So we wanted to clear this up and make clear who's responsible for these things.
Before you move forward, Senator Stevenson's light is on. Let me go to that
Yeah,
just in
that'd be
case
great.
this question relates to a slide.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we actually in the state of Utah, we have about, I don't know, there's 22 or 23 land use authorities. Some of them are very small. Some of them, I think the Heber Valley Railroad is one. There's something to do with the Meatpacking Association or a meat group, Utah Lake. But there's a lot of them, and I think the direction you're headed in here is really great.
Are these state land use authorities?
Mhm.
I was not aware of that.
Fair Board, the fair operations is
Fair
a land use authority.
We
So there are several of them, and we use them quite often. And there is kind of a movement with the governor's office right now to kind of move these to where we can kind of standardize. It's almost impossible to standardize because they all have such an individual, unique place in the economic development opportunities that we take advantage of in the state. But there are a lot of them. So, but you did mention the big three.
Thank you, because we've called that out in the statute, and if there are more, we need to figure that out. Who could help me with that?
I've got that information
Do you?
in Senator Stevenson. I'm working on the bill with Senator Stevenson. So
Yeah.
it is. I think we've got 23 on the list today, but we're gonna have to whittle through it. I think to Senator Stevenson's point, though, they are all unique. They're all different. So it's going to be a task on our part.
Interesting. Thank you. I was not aware of that. Any other questions before we proceed?
One question I had: conflict of interest disclosures. Obviously, I support this. Campaign finance donations. It's excluded. Why?
Just because I'd like to add that. We haven't had time in the drafting process to get to that. We've met like 10 times, and just to try to get the conflict of interest side, we decided to bite one bite at a time.
Gotcha.
So we'll come back to that.
Well, and my encouragement is obviously I support this concept. I think it's a good concept. I think as it moves forward, that's something that you should consider. I represent a lot of cities, and looking at campaign finance disclosure from city to county, it's always difficult to view it, and having a standard form that we have is very helpful. I think the Lieutenant Governor's office done a great job with that, inputting the data in the form, and it's very much easier to use than what we see with our cities today.
It is. So this would really help improve transparency. Now, what you're seeing here is anything in red is the proposed modifications. And maybe let me go back. Right now, it's a there's a penalty, both criminally and civilly, if you fail to disclose a conflict and you're required to. But the statute only, if you fail to file a conflict of interest, only applies to state officers today. And primarily that's because there's not an annual requirement for many of our political subdivisions. You do it once when you are appointed, and then you don't have to, there's nothing to prompt you to say you need to file annually. So this shows for both failure to file and failure to disclose a conflict what the modifications would be. So today there's a $100 civil penalty for state office holders. The bill would standardize that across the board as the civil side. Now, if a prosecutor decides that this is so serious, we also want to charge them with a criminal offense, it adds a Class B misdemeanor, so the prosecutor would be able to choose to go with a Class B misdemeanor, or the penalties that are in statute today, which vary widely. For example, on the municipal side, depending on how the monetary value involved, it goes anywhere from a Class B to a felony 2, which is very, very serious for a conflict of interest. And the other key thing that we've been working on is who enforces this. Because today the Lieutenant Governor's office says that we don't want to be the enforcer for the whole state. And I agree with that we should have local control. So the principle is that whoever's responsible for that election in that area will be responsible for administering and making sure that people do file their conflict of interest disclosures. So at the county level, that would be the county clerk who has responsibility for elections. At the municipal level, the city recorder or the town clerk, if it's a town, special district clerk for, it looks like I've mixed those two up there for the school district and special districts, and the board administrator for the state land use authority. And that way we can take advantage of central tools that we get with the software platforms, but still maintain local control. And these, we're calling them special filing officers, are basically responsible for administering and making sure that local officials would take care of these disclosures.
One other comment. I received a text message from the public, and it just says conflict of interest includes special districts, but should also include interlocal agencies. That in my area that would be MAG. In your area it'd be the WFRC.
Yeah.
I think it's not fatal to this bill today, but as we get into session, I think you probably do need to look at interlocal agencies as well.
That would open up a large, something new. That would be a new set of people who are not required to disclose conflicts of interest today. But I'm happy to look at that, and maybe that would be appropriate to add those to the list, but I don't believe they're required to today.
Okay.
So where do we go from here? I'd like your support to move this forward as a committee bill, but we've still got a lot of work to do. We need to talk some more with municipalities, the League of Cities, Association of Counties, etc., on making sure that what we've got in the statute works operationally, because it's only going to be effective if it works operationally for the local officials who have to administer this. We want to keep the principle that if they have an additional responsibility above the basic state level of disclosure, they can keep that. And the third is just what you brought up, Mr. Chair, that when we're asked, hey, there might be other state boards, these other authorities that I didn't even know existed, who people feel like should be disclosing their conflicts in a transparent manner. How do we handle those and make sure the statute is clear on how to do that? If we're having some challenges with the procurement process for the new software, and the fiscal note has the estimates we have right now, let me be clear on this, have come in very high. Now the procurement process is not done, and we're hoping that we can negotiate and get those costs for new software down to a very reasonable level. If we can get it down to a reasonable level, we'll also add the campaign finance reform. As we've talked about before, the main cost is getting the software in place. The incremental cost of adding additional users to it is very small. So we're hopeful we can get there and get it down to a reasonable cost. With that, I'll open it for take questions or comments.
Let's jump in with committee questions, and then I am going to open this one up to the public as well. Members of the committee, questions, comments? Okay, I don't see any at this point, but if after we go to the public, if something pops up, let's do that. Anybody from the public want to comment on this issue? We've got one online. Jordan Hess, we see you online. We're going to unmute your mic. Go ahead and jump on, Jordan. And we're glad surgery went okay. Jordan, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Yep. Jump in.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, surgery went well, recovering well. Jordan Hess, Washington City. Would this software notify municipalities when there is a filing made? Because would our city recorder have to log in daily and search the names to see if anyone new from our city has filed?
Thank you for the question. The intent is that whoever is in charge of Washington City would be basically an administrator to send those requirements out. And right now, the way the statute is written for the state is the annual filing is required between, I think it's the 1st and the 15th, or the 1st and the 10th of January. So the beginning of every year is the standard time when things are filed. The law also says, as it stands today, that if you have a change, say in your employment, or you make an investment that could be a conflict, that you have to disclose that at the time. Right now, the system's set up so that it prompts you. The administrator sends a prompt to each official to say, fill out your disclosure in January during the window. If you have a change, it's up to the user or the elected official to make that change. And I believe, Jordan, that there are alerts that you could automatically be notified, but I'm not certain of that, but happy to work with you on that, and I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jordan. Let's go back. Let's close public comment. Let's go back to the committee with further questions or comments. Let me state something. I don't see any lights on. We should take committee action today. I think this is an important bill for our committee. I think to your point, Representative Cutler, I don't know that it's perfect today, but we would hate to see this bill abandoned and start all over. If we took committee action today, recommended this as with a favorable recommendation, if we had a lone, hypothetically, if we had a lone no vote, the bill would move forward, but it couldn't go straight to the board. That would allow Representative Cutler to move forward with the legislation and to continue working on this issue without losing drafting priority. As I've talked to Chair Dunnigan, I think our preference would be to see this move forward, but I don't think it'd be right to send it straight to the board immediately. So as we look at action today, a unanimous vote, I don't think you would do that, but a unanimous vote would put it all the way to the board potentially. If we had a single dissenting vote, it would move forward. He'd still have drafting priority. We could continue to work on this bill. What are your thoughts to that comment?
So if there's a substitutes and changes, a new version, does that still move directly to the board?
It shouldn't. No,
it shouldn't, right? So I'm certain there will be updates and changes, and I would commit to you that I would not take it straight to the board. I would bring it back to the political subdivisions and have a further discussion on this.
Let's go to the committee. Representative Gardner.
Thank you. I'll make a motion that we recommend this bill favorably.
Perfect. So the motion is that we favorably recommend this bill as a committee bill file. Let's discussion to that motion. Okay, seeing none, back to the maker of the motion.
Would someone, I assume that I can't vote no as the sponsor of the motion, but if someone...
You could, technically, but it has been done.
But if someone else wants to volunteer as
okay,
voice of the opposition, I'd be open to that.
Let's do a roll call vote. The chairs will vote last. How's that? We'll and who am I going to assign to the roll call vote? All right, Nathan Brady. Let's do that. Oh, I'll turn your mic. That'd be a great idea. So,
Okay. Senator Harper?
either way, let's just keep this bill moving forward. That's what I hope. Okay.
Senator Pitcher? Senator Stevenson?
I think your mic is on.
Now it is. Senator Wilson? Aye. Representative Benyon? Aye. Representative Cutler?
Aye.
Representative Garner?
Aye.
Representative Gwynn? Aye. Representative Kohler? Aye. Representative Kyle? Aye. Representative Lee? Aye. Representative Snyder? Representative Tusher? No. Representative Walter? Aye. Representative Dunnigan? Aye. Senator McCall?
Aye. Okay, we're going to keep this bill moving forward. 11-2. One dissenting vote in the House, one dissenting vote in the Senate. Thank you, Senator Harper. Let's move forward in the agenda. I'm going to go to Katie Hall with item number 4, and we'll come back to Representative Dunnigan after that. Before we go to that, Representative Tusher, we're good. Just so you know, before you got here, we did take a motion to approve Metro Township modifications as a committee bill with the technical changes that Bob had made to the bill. I know you'd worked on that, so that has been done. All right, Representative Hall, the time is yours. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm just going to pull up my notes real quick. So this committee heard a discussion on the Ogden Airport issue back in June, and I just wanted to thank Chair Dunnigan for reaching out to me after that discussion and saying he wanted to hear from the airport hangar owners because there wasn't enough time at that discussion in June. So I really appreciate that, and they really appreciate that. I wanted to let you know that. My goal is to let them do most of the talking today, because that's kind of the point. I passed out the same flyer that I passed out last time. There's one change on the audit. That request was accepted by the Legislative Audit Committee in September, and so that has started October 1st or somewhere around there. So just so you know that on that. And if, just to refresh your memories of the Ogden Airport, there's been hangar land leases that are, the reversionary clauses are being enacted at Ogden Airport, which hasn't been done in the history of the airport, and seemingly not in any general aviation airports in Utah as well. So that's kind of where that, just a little refresher, and I'll take questions after, but my bulk of the time I really want to let the hangar owners speak and let you know what's been going on. So I appreciate that. So if you're okay, I would like to move forward with that.
Let's do that. Let's move to your members of the public. So will you, as they come up, if they're with you, introduce them. I'm going to include them as part of your presentation, so you can have your folks come. If there's other members of the public that want to comment, let's take you after the members that Representative Hall has. So go ahead and bring them up. Let's do it. The mic is on, and when you come up, we're glad you're here. Just make sure you introduce yourself. We have thousands of people listening online, and we want to make sure they know who you are.
Thousands, yes.
Pretty sure we have like 10, so 10 or 11. I turned it off when the number got so high. And just make sure you pull your mic up. Sometimes members of the public forget to pull it up. So.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the committee chairs and the members of the committee and Representative Hall for allowing me to speak with you today. My name is Brian Janroy. My wife and I are Morgan County Mountain Green residents and property owners. We've also lived in Davis and Weber County over the past 22 years that we've lived in Utah. I'm a 27-year combat veteran from the United States Air Force, retired in 2007. In the past 17 years, I've been in the private sector in aerospace and defense. I'm here this morning to speak as the co-owner and co-founder of two businesses on or near the Ogden Airport. Apogee Works is an aerospace defense weapons system integrator, and BS2 is a holding company for 7 facilities on the airport. 3 years ago, after 2 failed attempts to put deals together to expand Apogee Works, which is a service-enabled veteran small business, and build a larger aviation manufacturing facility on the west side of Ogden Airport, we made a difficult decision to move off the airport. These deals fell through because the contract language found currently in Ogden City's airport land leases, and a part allows the city to change any lease document at any time for any reason. We're not the only business that abandoned investing in Ogden Airport. During this time frame, our 7 on-airport facilities have drastically decreased in value. This can be confirmed by looking at Weber County tax assessments over the last 3 years. At the same time, our land lease rates have dramatically increased over the last 4 years, outside the stated scope that my leases say CPI drives it. It is my opinion these issues are directly related to Ogden City's approach to airport management. Based on my observations, the core issue is several Ogden City employees have routinely briefed elected city officials that the FAA mandates or makes them do these things. This is patently false. Lease durations, facility age limits, and revisionary language are just a few examples that have been recorded as telling city officials, elected officials, that you have to do these things. Recently, Governor Newsom of California signed legislation which was generated in coordination with the FAA, industry experts, and aviation stakeholders in California, outlining this incorrect practice of pointing to the FAA as the root of their decisions. Frankly, if the state of California can address these issues, it's beyond me why the state of Utah is even having to talk about this. My ask to you, the committee, is simple. Please sit down with the FAA Northwest Regional Authority, the Director of Utah Aeronautics, Matt Moss, AOPA's Northwest Regional Rep, and even at the AOPA national level, they would show up with little notice. Sit down with these folks and get to the bottom of what the FAA does or does not mandate. After being informed of these facts, I'd request this committee and the state of Utah consider leveling the playing field by ensuring that elected officials are legislatively educated. You can read into that as you will, and have a basis to work from. In other words, if they make a decision about taking personal property, in this case, hangars as an example, it is because they decided to do that, not because a federal agency made them make that decision. Then their constituents can decide if they still have a job at the next election. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm happy to take any questions or make any clarifications at this time.
Perfect. Any questions for this member of the public? Let's keep going forward. If you can stick around, if we have questions for you. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your service as well. I think your comments are helpful.
Hello, my name is David Shumway. I am a pilot and business owner in Ogden. I built my first hangar in Ogden in the mid-90s to house my airplane. With support from the airport manager, I went on to build 4 more as investments and to operate my business. What had been a vibrant, friendly airport quickly changed when a new mayoral government came into power. Almost immediately, lease renewals were not honored under the then current lease terms and conditions. Instead of annual lease rate increases tied to the CPI as outlined in the agreements, fast changes were implemented and enforced. I saw my hangar rates climb almost 275% in the 4 years from 2019 to 23. During this time, hangar values plummeted due to Ogden City's unpredictable business practices. After 18 years of operating my business from my largest hangar, which housed our plane, I was informed that I had 90 days to move my manufacturing business out of my hangar and off the airport. I was told that I was lucky and that my lease gave me 90 days notice, whereas others had a 30-day notice provision. This is how Ogden treats its good tenants. I was amazed at their complete lack of understanding and disregarding what it takes to find property, build it out, and relocate a business out of the blue with a 90-day notice. This forced move required me to fire sale 3 of my 4 hangars to afford a new facility. These buildings sold for significantly less than the market value 2 years previously. At an airport advisory meeting, the city attorney assured us that they did not want to take our hangars. Not long afterwards, Title VIII was presented to the city council. Those who voted against did so when they learned that the city would be taking private hangars and property from the owners. We pled with the city council to at least let us help them understand the legal ramifications and losses to the city, county, and airport stakeholders if Title VIII passed, but we were ignored and it passed. This property grab is a violation of trust. If the city is successful in confiscating our properties without any compensation, what incentive is there to maintain and upgrade these properties? The city will in many cases end up with derelict properties. Instead, the city could be encouraging free market investing with pride of ownership and business development, resulting in a thriving airport that provides consistent tax revenues to the city and county. Because the city made a law, it doesn't make it right. Legislative involvement is the only way Ogden will correct this travesty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. My name is Jill Coford. I'm an Ogden City resident. I've been asked to read a statement for one of the hangar owners because, quite frankly, she's afraid of the retribution and retaliation from the city that may happen if she speaks. So these are her words. I'm a retired school counselor and reside in Layton. I developed a passion for aviation and worked hard to become a private pilot and hangar owner at the Ogden Airport. Anticipating growth in hangar values, approximately 20 years ago, I purchased 2 hangars at the Ogden Airport, anticipating that they would be a secure retirement investment and that I could enjoy their use leading up to retirement. I have always been in good standing with the city, and I have made significant improvements to both hangars, costing thousands of dollars. When my lease came up for renewal on my first hangar, in conversations with the airport manager, I made it clear that my intent was to renew my lease. Due to some required expensive improvements by the city, I did not receive a lease at that time. However, for years, I continued to be invoiced by the city annually and paid for the ground lease and the taxes each year, but never received the requested lease. Recently, I was served with an unlawful detainer action by Ogden City and required to vacate my first hangar. On my attorney's advice, I filed a lawsuit for relief against the city. The court ruled in my favor, but immediately Ogden City appealed the decision. In an effort to protect my financial liability, I relinquished control of a valuable hangar under protest to the city. This action did not satisfy the city, and in retaliation, they have continued to pursue further penalties against me for damages and attorney's fees, in addition to have already taken possession of a hangar that would easily be valued over $100,000 at any other airport. The lease on my second hangar recently expired, for which I requested a renewal. It has been over a year since my request, and the airport manager has provided no response. This is consistent to how he treats others in similar situations. Because of the existing court action, I am now in the crosshairs of the airport manager in the city, and am still enduring their retaliatory actions. Ogden City's actions are perfect examples of government takings, not for the common good, but to line Ogden City coffers. In fact, they have already profited from my investment by releasing the first hangar that they took. I am asking for your legislative help to extinguish this immoral and unethical behavior. A quote from the Ogden City Attorney: "Don't fight me. I can outspend you." He has succeeded. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Good morning. My name is Troy Larkin. I have been in the South Ogden area for resident over 60 years. For 6.5 of those years, I was appointed by the Ogden Mayor to sit on the Ogden Airport Advisory Committee, which is a committee then would make recommendations to the city for corrections, suggestions, complaint, filing, those types of things that we would be able to mitigate some of those suggestions from the airport community to the Ogden City. I'm also a small business owner. I've created 6 different entities in the last 40 years. And during that time frame, I had a number of clients who were all across the United States and some internationally. We looked at our client base, and west of the Mississippi, we had the majority of our clients. We needed a better, faster, more efficient way to get to our clients. So we decided to invest in an aircraft. There was a 4-seater aircraft. In so doing, it required that we also had a hangar. We found a small airport or an airline that had a hangar in the Ogden Airport, and we had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for that hangar. Simultaneously, we engaged with the airport manager, which is here today, 4 managers ago, and one of my concerns as an investor would say, at the end of this lease, and when I no longer have my airplane and I get rid of my hangar, I want to make sure that I can sell my hangar to another individual that would require that, just like I bought from others as well. He indicated to me that that's what Ogden City had been doing for 70 years, and he anticipated that it would perpetuate that into the future as well. 2 issues on my lease that were engaged at that time is, one, I had a 5-year first right of refusal option to extend my lease, though the current Ogden Airport manager indicated that typically they would engage in another 15-year lease at the end of my 15-year lease if that's what decided to do so. Little history of the Ogden Airport, it started in 1943. It's been 80 years ago. And since that time period, with the exception of the last couple of years, Ogden has always leased the ground to individuals like me, of hangar owners or corporations that want to make a profit by operating on the Ogden Airport, with the intent of renewing those leases, or the intent that the individual could sell that hangar to someone else to come in and they would again engage in a lease with that new entity as well. 3 years ago, we had a new airport manager. And that new airport manager was tasked to make Ogden City Airport profitable. He came up with a plan that he had a business plan to make it profitable. And he had suggested strongly that at the end of the leases, you don't renegotiate or you don't allow that 5-year extension when you have the first right of refusal. Neither do you reissue a new lease for that hangar owner that wanted to remain there. But instead, we would take that hangar and give them an option. They could move it off the airport at a horrendous cost, or many of them were a construction of brick or block that are not able to do so, that they're then going to be forced to walk away and the city would take that hangar. But they would then graciously lease that same hangar that you spent the money for back to you if that's what you want to do. And if it wasn't you, we'd find another tenant to do so as well. The city attorney had to modify Title 8, which it did require some indication there. But in Title 8, there's 3 things that were new. 1, integrated reversion clause that said at the end of the leases, we will not renew the lease, but it reverts back to the city, which we do not have and did not have previously. 2 is they would not renew regardless, either the 5-year extension or to renew a new lease. And 3rd was, even though they kept and maintained the CPI index increases, that by contract, that was going to be our increase. My rates would have increased roughly about 45% in a 15-year time period. But my rates have increased over 300% because Title 8 then allowed the city to do what they wanted. If we think we've got a loss, we're going to pass it on to the hangar owners. And I'm 300% more. My original lease started at $1,800. I'm now paying over $5,300 for that lease as well. As my lease came to a close, I approached Ogden City because they're in the middle of this and said, I would like to exercise my rights for my first right of refusal to get my 5-year extension. I was denied. I then made a formal request to say I want a new lease at 15 years, and I again was denied. All I can surmise is they take a look at my hangar, $450,000 hangar, that they say, we want to take it from you, and we want to turn around and lease it back to you or someone else for $3,000 or $4,000 a month, and it will be at no benefit for you whatsoever. My ask is this, is 1, if Ogden City is going to take our hangars, they do what the other government entities is, which is they pay us fair market values for those hangars, especially if they got a different use. 2, revert back to what they've done for the last 80 years, and that is renew our leases, allow private investors to invest in Ogden City Airport and to help it grow, and allow us to have those 15-year leases on a consistent basis like they've done for the last 80 years as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity. Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Kelly Crozier. I live in Roy, Utah. My family owns a business at the Ogden Airport. In 1985, we were awarded a GSA contract with the Forest Service to build a building and aircraft for firefighting equipment at Ogden. Since the time, the Forest Service has called our facility home and have been given regular lease renewals by Ogden City. In 2005, we added a $3.5 million addition to our facility. In exchange for an investment, we received a 20-year lease with options to renew. 2018, based on the Forest Service needs, we informed Ogden City of our need to expand again and invest another $1.4 million. With this level of investment, we asked and expected a minimum of a 20-year lease. After an extensive waiting period, which caused concern by our tenant, on January 1st, 2020, the city was only willing to give a 15-year lease for our large investment. Then Ogden City changed all rules for leases with their Title 8. ordinance passed on April 2021, 16 months after the signing of the 15-year lease, essentially making our signed lease agreement worthless. Additionally, at the time, the city introduced subtenant lease agreements with new requirements by the city. Included in this document was the demand to know how much we are being paid by rent from the subtenant. Because the city attorney misrepresented the FAA grant assurance language, he believed the federal government, United States Forest Service, should be treated the same as a private hangar owner. The FAA language reads, similar situated tenants. Why would a city attorney believe United States Forest Service is similarly situated to a private hangar owner? The United States government, GSA, has continued to refuse to sign the subtenant lease, stating it is one of the most illegal documents they have ever seen. For example, Ogden City actually expects me, the landlord, to insure the planes that are in my hangar and owned by the government. Additionally, Ogden City, without any financial interest, insists on being named first on the insurance policy for the building. And now the punchline, why we are here. Because the federal government would not sign the city's legal subtenant lease, I was given a notice by the airport manager to evict the Forest Service from my property, which I refused to do. This incredible act of evicting the Forest Service from this strategic location would jeopardize firefighting capability throughout the western United States. I have provided this eviction document by the city to this committee. To summarize what I have shared with you is an example of what happens when a city attorney attempts to make policy for municipalities. Ogden City, it neither reflects financial safety, common sense, or has nothing to improve the financial well-being of Ogden City, if that was the original intent. Ogden City is in desperate need of help from the state legislature for the sake of the safety for all of the state of Utah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And you mentioned you'd provided that.
I will give it to you right now.
Okay. Yeah, I'd curious to see that. Right, Representative Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can just tell I'm going to make it super brief. I know we're running short on time. But I'm just going to
We got all kinds of time.
I have to get back to
Don't tell
education.
Representative
Peterson. After the last committee meeting in June, I met with the city, with the hangar owners. There was probably 40 stories just like the ones you just heard. I also met with Ogden City, beginning of July, I believe it was. We had a really good discussion. I understand some of the constraints and things that they're under. The airport is old. There's some older hangars and there's some issues there for sure. So at the end of our discussion, I asked if they would be willing to meet with a man named Kurt Castagna. He's with NATA. He's a aviation consultant who had reached out to me back during the session when I had a bill file open for this. And he felt like he could have maybe kind of bridge the gap, this chasm that has been created between the city and the hangar owners. And he felt like he had some really good ideas and was willing to see if the city wanted to work with them. And when I mentioned his name, the city attorney, who you heard from last committee meeting, Gary Williams, he was so excited. He literally said, Kirk Castagna, he wrote these articles that I've printed off that we're using. So yeah, that would be great. So I set up a phone call with Brandon Cooper, who is the business development manager or director for Ogden City, and Kurt. Long story short, he's like, yes, we want to work with you. Let's do it. I said, great, you guys, this is great. Third party kind of helping this, what you've just seen, right? And so I kind of was like, in your hands, because you got all the paperworky stuff, all the airport stuff. That's not my wheelhouse. Every 3 weeks, I would kind of text and see how it was going. So that was kind of the end of July, beginning of August. 3 weeks later, how's it going? Still working on contracts. Things are moving forward. Great. 3 weeks later, moving forward. Great. We'll have something to you next week from Brandon Cooper. Text Kurt again. 3 weeks later, he says, we were moving. I haven't heard from Kurt. I've texted him. I've called him. Nothing's happening. Or I haven't heard from Brandon. Nothing's happening. So then I did a text together, finally heard from Brandon again. We're moving forward. Things are going great. End of September, things are moving forward, going great. October, I say, okay, we have a committee meeting. We're going to meet with hangar owners. I want to tell them the airport is working with the city and the hangar owners, and city is working together to kind of do something with this Kurt Costanza guy helping. And Kurt texted me at that time, this is mid-October, mid to end of October, and says the city says that they cannot work with me now because of the legislative audit. So because we started a legislative audit, they, for some reason, can't work with him until 6 months, for 6 months, until the audit is done. So I called Cade Minchie, said, is there anything that the audit is doing that would prevent the city from working with someone who's helping them with contracts and everything? And he said, absolutely not. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
And I'm just going to jump in on that. There's no reason for the city not to work with stakeholders if there's an audit or not, right? I can say that as a chair. There's no reason. Okay, I cut you off, but,
no, but
I'm going to emphasize your point, and that literally makes no sense.
I agree completely. Kurt Castagna is on Zoom, I believe, on the live feed. If you have questions for him, if he wants to make a comment, I would be happy to.
Okay, I have two questions for you, and then I'm going to open it up to the committee.
Okay.
I am troubled. I'm concerned. I don't know if you have a bill file open yet or not. I know you've been working on this. You've been trying to work on it in good faith.
Yep.
If this was happening at my Spanish Fork Airport, my locals would be going crazy, and I think that's understandable. My question for you is it a local issue? Should the state be involved? And the second question for you, is this just an issue of personnel and personalities today? Obviously, we've heard that we've had some significant change in personnel recently, and it seems like the situation has gotten much worse. You don't have to answer that question if you don't want to, but I would like an answer to the first question. Is this a local issue or is this a state issue?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I think it should be a local issue, but as we've heard, they've been dealing with this for 4 or 5 years without anyone listening. And so when I have constituents who are coming to me, and other representatives have constituents who are coming to them that have hangars on the airport. Kara Berkland's the one that started this bill last year. She has constituents. Other people have constituents. It becomes something that we should be taking a look at. I feel like I've bent over backwards to try and find a non-legislative way through this, because I think that's important. I don't love big government. I don't love hands down approach or top down approach, but they don't seem to be willing to want to work. So, and to your second question, I'm happy to answer that. There is a mayoral election next week. That could change some things. I've seen debates from the two candidates, and this is a big issue, and they both seem willing to want to work with it. So I hope so, but I'm not holding my breath. I will be preparing a bill draft. I have one open, and I've been talking to Bob. I think Bob Reese is my drafter. We have some.
He's really good.
We have
know
some
him.
ideas. Yes, and we've had some ideas, and I've never met you in real life, so I didn't even see that was. Anyway, we have a few ideas. I'm happy to go over those if you want, but in the interest of time, it's up to you.
We're going to keep this committee moving forward. I may have a follow-up question. I do see that Kurt's hand is up. He is online, but I want to hear from committee members first. Let me go to Senator Stevenson. This is in your neck of the woods. Jump in.
Thank you. I almost feel like I need a whistle. I'm going to referee something. And I believe that this is an issue. A lot of times we get into these things, but most of the time I'm a firm believer in solving things as close to the people as you can get them solved. If you've got a new mayoral election you're talking about, that may change things drastically. I can understand a bill if this cannot get resolved, but I don't think it's a committee bill material. I think it's a bill that needs full debate through the legislative process, if that's the direction we go. I don't want to bore everyone here with this, but I'm going to tell a really fast story. I was the mayor of Layton for a long while, and I found that sometimes we come down to the legislature and we find out that there's my neighbor's dog's barking, and I don't like that. And so the first thing I do is I go see if I can get someone to run a bill to quiet all the dogs in the state of Utah instead of talking to animal control or talking to the city or whoever. And what ends up happening is we end up quieting all the dogs in the state, and most of the dogs are hired to bark. And this kind of falls in that category a little bit, I believe. And that I'm not sure that I believe if there isn't a resolution here, government certainly shouldn't be taking people's property. We shouldn't be utilizing and allowing them to improve it. We should not be working in lease ranges that don't allow them to recoup their funds. And it seems like there's a lot of confusion to this, and I would hope that they can get it resolved. I would support legislation, but not as a committee bill. And I would wait to see what happens with the new mayor taking place. These things have a tendency to be kind of fluid sometimes, and local level it is really the best place to solve problems if we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Stevenson, we always appreciate your wisdom. One thing I would add is I don't think Representative Hall is asking for a committee bill today, but this the second time on the agenda, and I know she wanted to bring the concern, but I think that's a good point. Let's go. I've got lights on over here. I'm just going to turn on whoever's light it is. Tell me whose light that is. It's like right in the middle of the three. Is it Representative Gwynn?
That's me.
Okay.
Thank you. This, I agree, should be a local control issue, and I appreciate Representative Hall's patience, as well as the patience of her constituents. I've had constituents reach out to me who have been directly impacted by this. And yeah, there is an election coming, but I kind of personally get tired of being down here and talking about kicking the can further down the road. We've been kicking the can for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I don't want to set a precedent if it doesn't go the way it probably should in Ogden, where bad practices then move throughout the state and we find ourselves getting involved. And I am quite content with continuing this discussion, having this debate to put pressure on those who should resolve it to see if they can resolve it themselves. And if they don't, then we're in a position to do that for them and prevent this from encroaching throughout the rest of the state.
I think those comments are well placed. Let's go to Representative Snyder.
Yeah, and maybe just adding on to that, I think Senator Stevenson's wisdom is spot on, right? This local control being the place to settle these issues out. The unfortunate thing with me is this raises to our level is I don't know if the city attorney is illiterate to the laws of the state or just ignorant. But this is the second time in this committee that we've had a conversation where things have been misrepresented. Last committee, we weren't even able to discuss this issue per the comments of the city attorney. And now to hear that discussions are shut down because an audit takes place is totally asinine. I am gobsmacked to hear those types of comments made in a public forum by a public employee. So I think that at some point when government abuses rise to the point where they are impacting in a broad community, millions of dollars of assets, we have to take a position on this, unfortunately. So I'm optimistic that you're going to be able to solve this. You've got other colleagues who've been working very closely with you on this. But I think as a reminder to the political subdivisions of this state, which Ogden City is one of them, we may have to step in if they're not going to be at least honest with their constituents. So anyway, that's just the one comment I would maybe make on this issue.
Tell us what you really think, Representative Snyder.
It made me so mad.
All right, I've got to stop you from clapping. You are out of order. I did get a text message from Kyle Palmer. Jerry left the room, but he said, I want to buy a book of parables from that man. So let's move to the next item on the, I'm going to go to Representative Kyle. I think we've had a really good discussion. I'm actually not going to take long public comment. We do have a big agenda item. I think it's clear where this committee is at. I think you've got some really good support, Representative Hall. I think you've got your marching orders. I don't think we need a. I know you're not asking for a committee bill, so after Representative Kyle, I'm actually not going to take public comment. I'm gonna let it lie where it's at. I think it's very clear where this committee is at. I think I'm just going to say it. We want to see a solution. We don't want to see this issue before the legislature. It's a local issue. It needs to be resolved, and let's get it resolved. Representative Kyle.
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit of color to this. I think there has been a severe lack of political leadership on this issue at the local level, and the comment that was read says, "Don't fight," from the city attorney. "Don't fight me. I can outspend you." That I've received so many similar types of comments from my constituents that is the attitude that they've had to deal with interacting with the city, and I see administrators doing things without political any political leadership, and when we see that the Forest Service being affected, that really affects my community as well, and not just in Ogden but throughout northern Utah, and all their firefighting equipment, their ability to respond to it. And I think, I am completely on board with what these guys are saying. It needs to be addressed, and if the city won't do it, we will.
Okay, perfect. I'm not even going to take a poll of the committee. We want this issue resolved. Thank you. Let's go to the next item on the agenda. Representative Peterson, hopefully this is you've got a tough issue too. So the time is yours on a difficult issue. We appreciate all the work you've done. We know you've worked this in other committees as well, and you've been working diligently. So jump in. Time's yours.
Thank you. I think, Nathan's got my slides up. Thanks. So we're kind of hopeful we could have a bill for you to review. We're really close. We sent the draft out to stakeholders in the last couple of hours. So they're giving feedback right now. But what I wanted to do today is just kind of reorient you to this issue and then talk about the working group that we've had and the compromise that we've arrived at. I also want to give my appreciation to Senator Harper, who's been participating with all of that and been incredibly supportive. So, transportation utility fees. You can go to the next slide. So, just to remind you, cities have been charging transportation utility fees, about a dozen of them, for a decade, for a long time. And this issue went to court. The Supreme Court ruled just in March, after we finished our session last year, on 3 items. You can go to the next slide. Those 3 items, the ruling was that the transportation utility fee is a fee, that cities have the authority to impose the fee. The question they did not answer is, how do we determine if that fee is reasonable and tied to the user? So that was kind of the task that we took up as a working group, to say, can we come up with a process or a standard of reasonableness, so that if cities decide to impose this fee, that it is both reasonable and related specifically to the user's use. And is there a way to do that? And can we create that standard? So this is the compromise that we've come up with. The group has included locally elected officials, League of Cities and Towns, Taxpayers Association, Libertas, Wasatch Front Regional Council, and just some others that have had some thoughts about these kinds of fees and about transportation in general as an important part of infrastructure for cities. So these are the 3 concepts that are included in the draft bill. So the first one is that one of the things we heard when we came to both this committee and transportation was a concern that if we allow a transportation utility fee, are they going to just start charging fees for everything? Are people not going to go through truth and taxation because they can just create fees for everything, and then they'll just have a fee process? So as we looked through what other services might a city charge a fee for, which ones would make sense, which ones would not, and are there some that we should maybe as a legislature take that prerogative and prohibit cities from charging? The 2 that there was some agreement on were broadband and public safety. We're still clarifying how public safety is going to look. There is some precedence for not charging fees for public safety. It's a general service, but we want to make sure that, for example, 911 surcharges, or if someone calls an ambulance, they have to pay for the ambulance, things like that none of that gets captured. What we're trying to think through is broad-based fees for public safety as opposed to fees for a specific service, and ensure that language is correct. There's also some instances where cities join together to form police departments. Cities that are less than 65,000 aren't required to have an in-house police department, and they might need some different funding mechanisms to make those police departments happen. So
we want to be cognizant of those issues. So the public safety stuff, we're still working through some language there. And that would be the first part of the bill, to address that concern about cities will no longer go through truth and taxation. They still will have to for majority of their services. Next slide. The next thing that was important was creating a process. So the process that we've come up with requires the city to go through a study to look at what specific services they want to provide in addition to what they're currently providing. There's a maintenance of effort requirement here. And then they have to figure out if they increase their service, they have to look at the different user types, residential versus commercial, and maybe some differences between even commercial users. Are you receiving freight? Do you have a drive-through? Is it a gas station? Things like that that might have more impact on your city roads. They need to come up with a defensible methodology for saying, first, we're going to fund these things, and second, we're going to differentiate how users pay for them. They'll have to go through a very public process to adopt this fee, including, public hearings. They have to vote on it separately. They can't just include it in their fee schedule. And then, all the funds will need to go into a account that can't be commingled with other accounts, can only be spent on those predetermined allowable uses. And then finally, they'll have to go through an annual review to make sure that fee still is meeting their obligation. If there's changes in other transportation funding sources, they'll have to evaluate whether it's still appropriate to charge that fee. And everything is subject to referendum. So if they take a legislative action related to this and people aren't happy with it, it's specifically tied to referendum opportunity for citizens. Cities that currently have a transportation utility fee will be given a little bit of a runway to get in compliance if they decide to continue to charge one. Otherwise, their fee will expire. And then the last part of the bill that we has been agreed upon is that a fee will expire. This is something we haven't done necessarily before. But one of the concerns we heard when it came to this committee and to transportation was once you impose a fee never goes away. And so we had that conversation. If we're really talking about user fees, it's important that it really is tied to how the user is using the road and the cost that the city incurs. So every 10 years, this fee would expire, and the city would have to go through this process again if they wanted to continue to charge a fee. I think that recency is important when we talk about a reasonable standard on creating the fee. So that is kind of where we've landed. Like I said, we're still working on language. I'm not sure if there's some in the audience that have been in the working group that might like to comment, but that's where we are.
Okay. Let's go to the committee first, and then we'll go to the audience. Are there questions from members of the committee? Okay. Let's go to the audience. Actually, we've got Representative Lee. Sorry.
Oh.
Your light was hiding in the corner.
No, you're fine. Thanks. I just need to applaud you, Representative Peterson, for working with different groups on this. This is not an easy thing to work out. It's something that's necessary, but at the same time, we need to be very careful with the direction we go about it. Fees, taxes are really putting a strain on people's lives right now, and so to find a good common ground on this, I think, is really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lee. All right, members of the public. Rusty, you're first. We know who you are, but please state your name.
Rusty Cannon, president of the Utah Taxpayers Association. Cam and I were joking we should come up here hand in hand. It's been a long process on this, something that our association has struggled with these transportation utility fees, but we've made a lot of headway with Representative Peterson and the working group the last couple of months, and we're in full support of this, the bill as it's being crafted now. As we described it in our meeting the other day, I think, I don't want to speak for Cam, but the League and the Taxpayers Association are both comfortably uncomfortable as we work out the details of this, but happy to answer any questions as to why we think this is a good fit. But we think it's a package that is very productive for all those that are interested. So happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Perfect. You may have a question. Hold on. I've got a light over. I think that's Representative
Sorry,
Gordon.
it's not a question. It's just a comment. If I
Okay,
could.
jump in.
I think that speaks accolades to the work that has been done. I'll be honest. I did not expect to hear what I just heard.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. And so I just wanted to show my appreciation to all the stakeholders involved that they were able to get to this position.
Perfect. Representative Kohler.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question on the 10 years. Been in local government for a while, but why was 10 years picked, and some rationale for that?
The 10 years. So we, two thoughts. First, the ZAP tax and RAP tax expire every 10 years. So there was kind of this thought that we have a process already that's a 10-year kind of process where you have to go back to your public and say, should we continue to do that? And then the second thought about 10 years is you think about a community like Vineyard, for example. They are growing so quickly and costs continue to change. I don't, at some point, the study that they've done to say we're going to impose this fee is no longer appropriate, frankly, for them to say that's the study we're pointing to impose this fee. We want some recency in them looking at their costs and their users and the growth and development that's happening in their community. And so 10 years kind of felt like a good amount of time. So.
Perfect. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Cameron Deal, Executive Director of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. I also want to thank Representative Peterson, Senator Harper, Rusty, and the rest of the work group. And Rusty used the line that we used the other day in our meeting that all sides were uncomfortably comfortable on where things have ended up here. So as Representative Peterson indicated, we're still working through final language. And so we have not taken an official vote yet, but it's what you have seen today is consistent with what our members have told us is workable. And so we got the language last night. We've circulated it. And we'll be ready to go for the session, but wanted to thank Representative Peterson and all the stakeholders, and feel like it's been both a very productive process, but we also think a productive outcome that meets the balance of what we heard from you as a committee, but also provides this tool for local governments to meet those transportation needs, both in growing communities and in older communities that are trying to maintain their infrastructure.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else? While he's coming up, Representative Peterson, one thing I want to get with you offline, broadband. I do have one large community, South Utah County, pre-iProvo, pre-Utopia, that built a broadband network. They have a carve-out that's been statutory for a long time. Let's talk about that and how that would apply.
Happy to.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jason Chipman, Director of Government Affairs with the Libertas Institute. I also just want to reiterate what has been previously said, having sat in very good working groups and not very good working groups in my time as a legislator. I can say this one was actually very good. I want to applaud her leadership on this, as well as Senator Harper. It was very, very productive. We feel that we are also uncomfortably comfortable with it. As has been said, as an example of this, in the last meeting, Cameron said he loved me and hated me within 5 minutes. So I think that was pretty representative of where we ended up in a good spot with this. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Not to be outdone.
Hello, Chair and members of the committee. Andrew Gruber, Executive Director of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. Perhaps I'm the last member of the parade here to briefly say we also think this is a great approach. Two reasons. One, investing in transportation at the state and local level is a critical function of government. It's essential to our economy, our mobility, and our quality of life. And two, we also think it's very appropriate to have reasonable parameters for when taxes and fees are imposed, and I think this compromise approach achieves both of those objectives. So thank you to the working group, Representative Peterson, Senator Harper.
Thank you for being here. Okay, anybody else? Back to the, let me go to Senator Harper and then Representative Peterson. I'll come to you with final thoughts. Senator Harper.
I just appreciate the chairs appointing me to this working group. It was.
We've had a lot of fun.
It was a love fest.
Do you know what though? It made sense. Were over there in transportation? Thank you for doing that. This is a tough issue to corral a group like that together. I think makes a lot of sense. So thank you for the hard work.
You know, this is something based on the Supreme Court decision that was authorized for the cities to go through and impose. And I must commend Representative Peterson. She really took this one and just kept people going again and again and again. She's a good fighter on this. I just barely received, thank you, Bob, for sending about 10 minutes ago the draft of the bill. I'll peruse that. I think the outstanding issues we need to make sure if we're going to have local governments give up the ability to impose a public safety and a broadband, that there is reasonable nexus for that. But anyway, thank you. This has been fun. And Representative Peterson, well done.
Thank you. Wow. Representative Peterson.
The working group was great. Everyone showed up. Everyone leaned in. At first, I didn't know if we were going to get there, but we did. So I appreciate everyone doing that. And I guess watch for the bill. Let us know if you have any questions. If you have any specific cities that are running into issues with this that were not contemplated, please feel free to reach out. We're still working on that draft and making sure that language is correct. So that's where we are.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work. All right, let's move to agenda item number 3 and then agenda item number 6. So we're going to have Chair Dunnigan go back to back. So first item, Open and Public Meeting Act amendments. And once Chair Dunnigan presents, we are looking for a motion to approve this. It is a committee bill, and we are looking for a vote to favorably recommend it at the end. Chair Dunnigan, the time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. So committee, you may recall that last month we adopted a version of this bill as a committee bill. Since then, we've had a couple of tweaks to it. I'm going to ask Mr. Reese to go through the tweaks.
Let's do that. Bob, go ahead.
Thank you. Again, Robert Reese, Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel, and standard disclaimer, my purpose is to explain the content of the bill, not to speak for or against it. There are a few changes from the draft you approved as a committee bill last interim meeting. On line 86 of the bill, we reinstated a concept that was deleted on line 38, the concept of convening. This is in the definition of what a meeting is. And a meeting is a meeting if it's convened by an individual with authority to convene the public body. That's one of the features of a meeting. So that concept was kind of lost with the repeal of some language earlier in the bill. This language reinstates that. The next one is on lines 112 through 117. This is again in the definition of meeting, and this is what a meeting is not. And this would add language that says a meeting is not a gathering of a public body if the gathering relates only to internal administrative public body matters and the public body doesn't spend any public
I'm going to break up your flow just for one moment.
Sorry.
Let's pull it up on the screen. This bill is intermediate material, so we'll pull it up as Robert goes through it. But I don't think there's any concern, but let's pull it up at the same time. Nathan Brady offered to do it, but now it's not up. So if he doesn't get up quick, we know who to blame. There we go.
So we're at line 112 through 117. Again, this language would just exclude from the definition of meeting a gathering that's involves only internal administrative matters and where the public body doesn't spend any money. The next one is on line 158 and 159. This is within the definition of a public body. There's some things listed that are excluded from the definition of public body. This would add an administrative staff committee of the legislature as something that is not a public body subject to the Open Public Meetings Law. The next one is on line 288, 289 of the bill. This deletes language that was kind of overlooked in the bill this last session. The bill last session eliminated the requirement for posting a paper copy of the agenda at the public meeting location. This just excludes that requirement for an electronic meeting. This was kind of overlooked in last year's bill. And then finally, at the very end of the bill, line 436, in the previous draft, section 52.4.210 was deleted, was repealed. we discovered that that might be overly broad, and so the proposal here is to narrow that provision to apply only to a public meeting. It's hard to explain this without getting way into the weeds, and I don't think you want to get there. But anyway, this is a clarification of what 52.4.210 means. It basically says nothing in the Open and Public Meetings Law is to be construed to restrict a member of a public body from transmitting an electronic message to other members of the public body at a time other than when the public body is convened. It provides, it narrows the definition of that so it doesn't apply in the situation with a 3-member public body meeting situation. And if you want clarification of that, anyway, that's basically what it does. It's a kind of a narrowing of that provision as opposed to repealing it outright.
Thank you, Robert. Well done. Thank you for your presentation. Representative Dunnigan.
So, Mr. Chair, since we adopted this, those are the changes. We've had some different entities come and say, could we get a little clarification here and there? And that's what this does. Thank you.
Okay, to the committee. Questions, clarifying questions or comments from committee members? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open up for public comment. Is there anybody from the public that wants to comment on this piece of legislation? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. I'm going to come back to the committee for committee action. And Chair Dunnigan, your mic is on. Do you want to go ahead and move?
I'll move adoption of this bill as a committee bill.
Okay, so the motion is favorably to recommend this as a committee bill. Open and Public Meetings Act amendments. That is properly before us. Is there discussion to that motion? Seeing none, back to the maker of the motion, Chair Dunnigan.
I'll waive.
That's been waived. The motion is properly before us. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed? I'll rule that passes unanimously. Let's move to item number 6 on the agenda. Congratulations, Chair Dunnigan. Item number 6 is yours as well, infrastructure financing districts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is infrastructure financing districts, and let me try to explain why this bill. As we're all aware, we have a shortage of homes. We, depending who you talk to, 30, 40, 50,000 units short of housing in Utah. And yet we have tens of thousands of titled building lots. These are building lots that have already been approved by local government. Many of them, well, they've had the proper zoning and so forth, but they're just sitting there. They're not being built on, and yet we need them. We need more homes and more structures. And one of the reasons is the expense of putting in the infrastructure. If it's in a city could bond or come up with the money to put in the roads and the sidewalks and curb and the water and the sewer, but then that goes on the city's balance sheet and it may impact their credit rating. So we have many of these building lots ready to be built with no infrastructure. So what this bill does is it says it's just a financing tool. And the gist of what this bill does is it allows a developer with the agreement of all the property owners for a piece of property to create a special district for the purpose of getting tax favored financing. It allows them to go to the bond market and get tax-free bonds instead of taxable, and the difference on that is maybe getting an interest rate of 5 to 7% instead of 10 to 15%. Now think if you're buying a home, would you rather have a 5% rate or a 12% rate? And so we're hopeful that this will allow developers, and I should say that this structure keeps it completely off the municipal's or the county's balance sheet. They're not responsible. This is its own independent district. It's responsible for it, and that's what it does. It creates some tax-favored financing so we can hopefully get some of these building lots built on and improved. With me, I have Ty McCutcheon. I'd like him to add to that, Mr. Chair.
Let me ask a question really quick, just so I understand. Last year we had a bill, Senator McKay wanted to create a special district for developers, and I think that included, broad zoning planning, everything. Yeah. Your bill is simply narrowed to finance.
Thank you for that clarity, Mr. Chair. So this can only go forward if the city's already given the zoning, not the service district, the city's zoned and approved the subdivision. So the city still has to go through that process. Then if it's ready to be built on, this is simply saying, let's tap into the tax-free financing and get some of these moving forward.
Perfect.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, members of the committee. My profession is large-scale community development. I've been working in this space for 30 years.
We gotta have you state your name one more time.
Oh, sorry, Ty McCutcheon.
I cut you off. It's my fault.
That's
Thank
all
you,
right.
Ty.
That's all right. For those I haven't met, that's my background. For over a decade, I led the development of the Daybreak project in South Jordan, and we continue to work in this space with some new projects in West Jordan and Saratoga Springs. I came to start working on this as part of the UEOC work group on growth and infrastructure in the spring of 2022. I made the mistake of having lunch with the then Speaker of the House and said, wouldn't it be great if we could get more infrastructure out ahead of our growth? And then I got a call from Kyle Palmer saying, you're going to join us on this effort. So be careful what you complain about. We worked collaboratively through the summer of 2022 with a group of stakeholders that included city attorneys, Cameron and his staff at the league, developers, professionals that work in the bonding space. One of those is here today with D.A. Davidson. They're one of the largest creators and sellers of these bonds across the United States. He'll speak a little bit to the market acceptance of these, as well as the lawyers that help create these types of financing districts and manage them. We worked with Representative Dunnigan, and we appreciate his leadership pulling this together. And I think the proposal is necessary for the reasons he described. I can give you two more concrete examples. There's a large development, not ours, in West Jordan that is already entitled for about 3,000 units. However, in that part of the city, they have a limitation on how much capacity in their water system. And so the developer in that circumstance is capped at 50 building permits before that new water tank is built. And the city has no bonding capacity today. And their PID policy, which we'll talk about in a minute, PIDs, would not accommodate this particular type of infrastructure. So I think you'll recognize that the goal here is to have the development community pay for the infrastructure that it needs. Part of the reason why the public markets are so important is that traditional bank financing, typically for a builder or developer, is very short term, a couple of years. And these types of investments need much longer amortization periods. So if you're thinking about water tanks, arterial and collector roads, sewer conveyance and treatment, the time horizon for repayment needs to be more than a couple of years. And so PIDs were created by the legislature 5 years ago to try and address this. And for a variety of political reasons, those have not been taken up very quickly. Over the last year and a half since we started working on this, a number of cities have now enacted PID legislation and even created some PIDs, which is great. But at the rate we're kind of getting adoption across the state, it'll be probably 20 more years before we get to all the high growth parts of the state. So clearly we need some solutions that help facilitate the infrastructure quicker. As Representative Dunnigan described, this legislation would allow for the landowner to directly create an infrastructure financing district, much of the way a new city is created, with a petition from 100% of the landowners in the proposed district. Unlike PIDs, though, the bonds that these districts could issue would be in conformance with the Assessment Area Act, which has been on the books for decades in the state of Utah. And for those who are not familiar with assessment bonds, they are not a mill levy bond, so there's not a general property tax to repay them. They're an allocated amount to each property within the district that is repaid over a certain period of time, up to 20 years. The amount of debt can be no more than 1/3 of an appraised finished value of the infrastructure once the infrastructure is built. And in this particular legislation, the repayment obligation would be at the time of certificate of occupancy in the case of an owner-occupied residential unit. In the case of commercial, where you have a sophisticated owner or developer investor, those bonds could stay to maturity. But it keeps the repayment within the development community itself, so that cities aren't burdened with, homeowners and voters coming in saying, hey, why do I have this obligation on my tax bill to repay? And we think that's a very important feature. As the representative said, the districts do not have land use or zoning authority. They cannot construct any infrastructure that's not already approved by a local jurisdiction. It does not impact city credit or bonding capacity. These districts do, in order to issue tax-exempt bonds, though, need to have a sovereign power, and so this anticipates creating that through the ability to impose a mill rate at the statutory limit of the lowest rate in the state for other special districts, which is 0.004. However, it cannot be used to bond against. So it's not there to become part of the financing tool. It's there to meet the test of sovereign power. Finally, before bonds can be issued, there's a requirement in the Assessment Act that market studies and appraisals be completed, as well as engineers' estimates for the specific public infrastructure that will be financed. Finally, and this is an important piece for cities' comfort, is that when these bonds are sold, all the proceeds are held by a trustee for the district and released back to the developer of the infrastructure only as the work is completed and have already been paid for. At the end of the completion of construction, the districts do not own any infrastructure. All of that infrastructure needs to be turned over to local jurisdiction, whether that's the city or a water or sewer district. And then further, unlike PIDs, if there is a default, the bondholders can foreclose their encumbrance on the developer and then extinguish and remove the liens from the property. Whereas a PID, once you create that mill levy, it is there until the bonds are paid in full. So the proceeds being held by the trustee, combined with this way of unencumbering the land in the case of a developer default, and the removal of the encumbrance in the case of a homeowner buying a house, really ensures that we've kept the repayment of these obligations within the development community. So at this point, I think it's far less than the development community would like, and it may be far more than a few cities would like, but I think it's a great narrow path and an alternative path to ensure that we build critical infrastructure for already approved projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one or two additional comments. So I had legislation last session we worked on going back to the prior years, Ty said, and then during last session. But in an effort to try to get closer to where all the interested parties want us to be, we've continued to work on it in this interim. One of the things I like about this is it puts the financial responsibility on the developer and on that project, not on the local government. And then let's say you have a subdivision with 100 lots and the developer bonds to put in the infrastructure. At time of closing on a particular house, when that house is sold, at closing, the bond that's related to that particular property has to be retired. So it's required that that property would no longer have an assessment. It's going to be closed, and as each property is closed at time of closing, the bond must be repaid. And with that, Mr. Chair, we're open to questions.
Let's do that. Thank you for your presentation. Let's go to committee members with questions. I think it's complicated enough. We're not getting a lot of questions. Okay. Representative Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions, and maybe they were asked. It was complicated, so hopefully maybe you answered some of them. But who is in charge of these districts? Are they going to be elected administrators, the board? Are they elected? Are they appointed? Is it the property developer that is the district? The board leader? What?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the draft of the legislation, obviously when you start one of these districts, it's empty land and no one's living there. So the applicant would name the initial board members, as is common practice today in the creation of finance districts. And then the legislation also has a mechanism whereby over time those roles are moved from the initial applicant developer to the eventual homeowners, residents, property owners within the boundaries of the district.
So does it become essentially an HOA in that way, or is it something else?
Well, its purpose is to ensure the administration and repayment of the debt. And I think there's also provisions in the legislation that upon the retirement of all of the debt, then the district is extinguished. Okay. And so unlike an HOA that would go on forever, the district is for a finite period in order to facilitate the repayment of the debt.
Okay. Has this been tried in other parts of the country in the world?
Yeah, so in other states where there's a higher uptake, there are mechanisms for landowners to more directly create finance districts. And so I wouldn't say this is modeled exactly like anybody else's. Utah, we work collaboratively with partners to try and come up with things that work for us, but I think the spirit is based on some things you might see in Texas or other places where there's significant, and I think our friends from D.A. Davidson will speak to the kind of the level of financing that takes place across the country versus in Utah using these tools.
So we talked a little bit about the what happens when the development defaults. Is there a way for if it doesn't work out, who pays if there's a redesign needed, if there's a whole new project coming in? Who pays at that point?
So in order to issue the bonds, before the issuance can be made, the specific list of projects to be financed, so Road 1, Tank 1, Transmission Line 2, those are all listed and estimated, and the proceeds are then held in escrow by the bond trustee until those are completed. So if there were a default, the funds necessary to build that very specific list of projects are still there, held by the bond trustee, to be released to whoever steps in. Probably the bondholders would hire someone to step in and finish the work so that they could get repaid. But those funds are held by the trustee.
Okay. Just finally, if a property developer is the sole owner of the property, you mentioned that a certain number of property owners create the district. If there's a sole owner, can they just create themselves by their own?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. In conformance with the requirements in the statute at that point.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. I'm going to ask a question and pretend like I'm an injury attorney and I don't know anything about a PID. And now I have a new tool. Tell me what a PID is in a way that I'll understand. Tell me why a PID isn't working today and why this new tool is better.
Mm-hmm. So when the PID legislation was enacted 5 years ago, the primary vehicle that was anticipated to use to issue bonds was a mill levy to be assessed on the properties within the boundaries of the district. So bonds could be issued to be repaid at a certain number of mills against those bonds. For a variety of reasons, local governments have been hesitant or reluctant to utilize those tools to finance the infrastructure. Part of it may be the unwillingness to levy a new property tax, which is understandable. Some of it may be discomfort with putting that burden on future owners within the city. So this proposal is meant to remove those potential risks that create political pressure on local governments and why they might not have been willing to work within the PID environment.
Okay, perfect. Let's go to Representative Lee. And I'm going to have a follow-up question, but I'm going to put Cameron on the spot afterwards. But Representative Lee.
Thanks, Chair. So I think I'm a little confused. So who repays this? Is it the homeowner?
No. So in the case of developments that are to be sold as owner-occupied residential housing, the developer or the home builder will repay that prior to it being conveyed to the homeowner. So it'll be like a bank loan. So when you have a house built, the builder usually takes out bank financing to build the house. This would be public financing for the public infrastructure, but it would have to be repaid before the home is sold to the homeowner. In the case of a commercial building owner, if the parties, the developer of the property and the commercial developer, wanted to leave the financing in place, that would be a discussion for them to have, because they're obviously sophisticated and they can make those types of decisions about, well, what's the best financial outcome for this particular property. So we leave that to their discretion. But for anyone who's buying a house in a district financed this way, they will not have any repayment obligations.
Just one follow-up to that.
Yep.
So would the developers not just raise their prices to help cover this?
Well, they're going to either fund this out of capital or borrowings or not build the subdivision. And today we have a lot of that happening where it's not financially feasible to build this system infrastructure with the financing or equity capabilities of the development community, which is why in other jurisdictions, other states, these kind of public finance tools are so effective.
Okay. Let's go back to Chair Dunnigan.
I like the IFID, if we're going to call it that, rather than PIDs for one reason. So on the PIDs.
Wait, what did you call it? An IFID?
IFID, IFD.
We gotta have better acronyms. I'm never gonna remember that.
I'm open. So, on a PID, there's a levy assessed on the development cost over 20 years or whatever. So the home buyer is going to go in and pay the market price for the home, but in addition to that, they're going to have this existing cost that they're going to repay over a number of years as a levy. I like the IFDs because it's included in the price of the home. If it's $15,000 of infrastructure costs for the home, that's going to be included in the price at time of closing. The buyer buys the house, pays $500,000, like they would if the city had provided the financing at market rate. But then they don't have any additional cost. They're done. They'll have to pay their regular financing cost for the mortgage, but there's no additional cost. And as Ty pointed out, I think it's important to understand that when a particular property is closed, when that home is closed, and the buyer takes possession, that proportional piece of the bond related to that property is retired, so it's done. And if you have a 100 lot subdivision, as it goes through, all that bond is retired by the time you get to the 100 lots. If they're owner occupied, the bond is retired and the district sunsets.
Okay, let's go to Representative. Is that Tusher or Kohler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question then. These things can be created by the entities that are in their jurisdictions now, whether county or city. Why isn't it working that way? A city can, I mean, you can go in and request the same entity be created by the city and they can do it for you.
There have been a number of cities for a variety of reasons, and Cam can probably speak to the diversity of his city members better, but I know the folks at Davidson are in front of councils every day talking about these districts. We've created some districts in some jurisdictions, and other jurisdictions have said we have no interest in utilizing the tools at all. Some local government candidates for office run on a no-growth platform, and even though the projects have already been approved, they find it untenable to then allow for financing of public infrastructure to create new land, even though the city's already approved the land use. So there's some interesting dynamics at play as to why the tools don't get used. But as I said, there have been a few more cities that have entered into the space, which is great, but the pace is just not going to allow us to keep up with what we need to do to house everybody that needs a house in Utah.
Comment, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, jump in.
I guess my concern is that an assessment area, which you're comparing this to, is not necessarily benign to bringing people in against their will. It's a government entity. It's a body politic that we're basically giving a developer. I can see the positive side of this on the finance side, and I think from what I've read and what I've heard, you've built in a system whereby it's not going to extend past the purchase, so the developer can't escape and leave it on the homeowner. But I still have a concern that the leverage that it can create is still something that elected officials in that area ought to have some stake in. That's my opinion. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. Let's keep moving forward. So, Chair Dunnigan, does that conclude your presentation? I know there's other people that are here to speak to it. Let's go to public comment.
I'm welcome to come back if there's questions,
yeah.
but I'll vacate
hang
this
around.
seat,
It's complicated enough. And then Cameron, I know you're going to come up, or somebody from the league. I just want to know about risk to cities, and we've heard that the risk is minimal, and tell me why or why not. So jump in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Brendan Brown. I work for a financial firm called D.A. Davidson. We have experience selling bonds from these types of districts all over the country, and so I've been working with the working group on this to make sure that whatever is approved, if anything's approved, that we can actually go into the capital markets and successfully complete a financing, because that's the whole point of this. And so we've been just giving sort of our expert advice on making sure we structure something that we can sell into the capital markets. And so just thought it would be helpful to just give a little bit of context. I know there's been a couple of questions about this, but on a typical year over the last 5 or 10 years, about 12 to 15 billion dollars of these types of bonds are sold throughout the country. So these are typically in higher growth states: Florida, Texas, some areas of California, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, Utah. High growth areas where you kind of need to build the infrastructure or find a tool to build the infrastructure in it ahead of the growth. And so in Utah, we are capturing about 2% of those dollars. So the capital markets are financing, over the last 5 to 6 years, about $100 billion worth of infrastructure across our country. And in Utah, we're capturing a very, very small percentage of those dollars. And so part of the reason has been alluded to is that the tools that are in place right now are getting stuck, right, for various reasons. And so this tool narrows the use of the financing vehicle, but allows the creation to occur in a quicker way. And so I think that's wise. We need to make sure that if the creation is outside of the cities or counties or jurisdictions, that we make sure we have a tool that's very well defined and narrow. But I think the whole goal is to draw some of that capital, more of that capital, into Utah, because this capital is flowing across our country one way or another. Prior to my work here in the state at D.A. Davidson, I worked for a large asset management firm based in New York, and we invested out of a $20 billion fund. So I would travel across the country looking at these special district financing transactions and decide where to deploy our capital. And I always wondered to myself, I'm from Utah originally, why isn't more capital flowing to Utah? And so the reason was because there wasn't a legislative framework to allow district financings to occur. The PID introduced that in 2019. This, I think, could be an enhancement to that, but it would allow more capital from our deep and liquid capital markets in this country to flow to Utah for the purpose of financing infrastructure. So just wanted to give that context, and happy to answer any questions if I can be helpful.
Okay, back to the committee. I don't see any questions. Anybody else from the public? We'll come to you after Mr. Dale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Hello again, Cameron Dale, the Executive Director of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And I appreciate the conversation, the deliberation, and the questions that have occurred in this committee. And I also want to appreciate publicly Representative Dunnigan for his work over the last few months as he has been attempting to thread a needle here. And I want to address some of the questions that have come up in the committee. The league has not yet taken a position on this bill, though Senator McHale, you referenced a couple of the bills from last session. We never took a position on Representative Dunnigan's bill last session either, because it didn't go to committee. We did take a position on the bill that you referenced, Senator McKay's bill, and we were opposed to that bill. This is different. But there are still some underlying challenges that I hope I can address here as we continue the dialogue. So you've had a lot of discussion here about the tool itself and the problem that the tool itself is trying to solve, which is around infrastructure funding and getting on top of our growth challenges. So there's that piece, which is the tool, but then there's also the change in the governance structure for the proposal compared to existing law. So two different issues. I'll address both of them, the tool and then the change. On the tool side, generally speaking, what Representative Dunnigan is trying to achieve here of taking the umbrella PID concept that went into effect in 2019 and redirecting where the debt lies and when it's paid off, and that is an important improvement, I think, over what one of the outcomes of PIDs has been. So when we talk about the structure of, I don't think I can get used to ifs, but right. So better term. So what I'm just going to refer to it as the district versus PIDs, so we can keep them separate. As was mentioned in 2019, the legislature authorized PIDs, and cities and counties, as the local government authorities, were the gatekeepers. They were responsible to say yes or no, and that's important. And the reason that that's important is because under the current PID statute, if you are expecting future residents to pay it back via property tax, you want to have elected officials who are making that decision. It's also important because the infrastructure that a PID would finance ultimately reverts back to that city or county. So the city or county will be the eventual owner. So therefore, it's important that the city or county is in that gatekeeper role within the PID, because it's going to be our infrastructure in perpetuity. And not only does it have to be built up front, but we have to maintain it in perpetuity. Okay, so under the PID umbrella, as was referenced, the primary mechanism there was going to be that property tax mill levy. And part of the reason, as Ty indicated, there's been a reluctance to adopt the PIDs was around concerns around that property tax and having the differential on the property tax. Other concerns were the impact of COVID. COVID changed everything. The bill passed 2019, COVID hit in 2020, and the market was not a usual market for a certain period of time. The other reason for the reluctance that we've learned as we've been talking to our members is just it's complicated, it's new, and trying to understand what the benefits were of communities. Just in the last month, I've had conversations with community leaders from Garden City to Virgin Town in southern Utah, from Harriman to West Jordan and others, who started with reluctance around PIDs, but have, after working with the subject matter experts, have recognized that they could serve a good benefit in their community, and they're looking to move forward with it, but they still act as that gatekeeper role. So the district proposal that Representative Dunnigan has before you, the tool piece, we think is an enhancement and improvement from what has historically been contemplated on the PID, because it's being paid off up front as opposed to relying on the property tax to pay it back. So the tool itself, we think that is a meaningful addition to the current tools with PIDs. The tricky piece is the structure and the proposed change within Representative Dunnigan's bill. That is where the idea of property owners being able to create their own district independent of the city or county approval of that district, that's the big change, is now they can create that. Now again, to Representative Dunnigan's credit, he's recognized our concern around the sovereign power piece, that essentially in order for this district to access the public bond markets, it has to have a federally defined sovereign power. So it has to have land use authority. Representative Dunnigan said, I don't want to go down that path. It has to have eminent domain authority. Representative Dunnigan said, I don't want to go down that path. The third potential sovereign power under federal law is the ability to tax. And so that's what's currently in the bill, is that ability to tax. So going forward, if I were, say, an injury attorney who didn't have any experience in this space, the district would be able to self-create the district, and then they would have a property tax authorization. Now, Representative Dunnigan has been trying to figure out some guardrails around the utilization of that property tax. So you couldn't increase the property tax until it converted to elected officials, for example. But still up front, in order for it to qualify as a public entity and access to bond markets, you still would have a self-created district of unelected officials who would have property tax authority, even though they wouldn't be using it for financing, and they couldn't raise it because of the guardrails that he's proposed. So the reason the city as a gatekeeper matters is, one, just that sovereign powers piece of within our communities, you could have these self-created districts that have the property tax authority that would start popping up within the communities. And the second reason why that gatekeeper role matters is because ultimately this infrastructure is turned back over to the city or the county. Again, Representative Dunnigan has been trying to thread the needle here to address that piece, but we are responsible for it in perpetuity once the bond is paid off and expires. We've had lots of discussions around what happens with default. Can it be subrogated to other property owners, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason I bring this up is the biggest concerns that we've heard back from our members has been local government operating as that gatekeeper role. And there are guardrails that this proposal is trying to address in that gatekeeper space, but our folks are still philosophically concerned, and then have those practical concerns of what happens, down the line. The last thing I'll point out is.
All right, it better be the last though, because we got.
Well,
a
in
couple.
that case, I won't make it the last point. I'll stop there to see if there.
Let's see if there's questions, and I don't want to cut you off. I know we've got one more member of the public, and then we've got Representative Benyon needs at least 40 minutes for her 2 items. So, are there questions, concerns from members of the committee? Let's wrap up with that one. We've got one more member of the public, and then I'm going to come back to Representative Dunnigan to maybe address some of the concerns, and then we'll go to committee action. So front row. I do have a light on. Senator Harper, if this was for Cameron. Senator Harper.
No, it's actually for Representative Dunnigan.
Let's take your question.
Okay. I guess the question that I have here, Representative, is if we put this into place, what guarantee is there that the money will be used for that? And what happens if there's a default with the developer that he goes into bankruptcy? How will somebody be able to close on the house and get this released on their property?
Okay, so that's a good question. Thank you. So the money in the bond that the assessment's covering their financing costs, that is not released until the improvement's done, and then it's released. And again, as I said at the time of closing, if you have a house and you're buying the house, at time of closing, that proportional piece of the bond must be retired at closing. So that debt on that piece of property is done. That person is out of the assessment. And so the money's still there. It's not like all this money's given up front to the developer and we hope it follows through on it, or she follows through. As the project goes forward, the money is released. And as each lot is sold, or each home is sold, then that debt has to be retired.
Okay, so then if I may, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
jump in.
Then what you're saying, and I think this is what Cameron was bringing up, the city then has to be the gatekeeper to make sure that everything is inspected properly, built to code, and then is they basically have to authorize the release on the property for each and every lot.
So what was the last part you said?
And that the city will need to make sure that on each and every lot that the debt or the obligation for that lot is released.
Well, I don't think that. So that will be done at closing. So that's going to, the bond holder of the bond's going to want to make sure it's repaid when that assessment's released. So I think that will be done at closing. Maybe Ty can talk about the intricacies of how that happens. I don't think the city has to police that. One thing I think we need to be clear. The city already has a gatekeeper role, the zoning. If it's not zoned for this, it can't happen. And guess what else? They have to approve the subdivision. If they don't think they have the capacity for the completed infrastructure, they're not compelled to improve as a subdivision. Only if the zoning is done, only if the subdivision is done. This is simply a financing tool to get tax-favored financing.
Okay, so who holds the money on that financing?
The bond.
The bond company does?
Yeah, the bond trustee.
Okay.
Not the city, not the developer. The city is the bond trustee who releases it proportionally as a project is completed.
And then they go through and I presume they go through and give the developer a repayment as those are requested.
Yeah, Ty, do you want to address this?
All right, we'll bring you right back up. Sorry.
Yeah, so
you're down to 28 minutes.
Yeah.
Representative Benyon.
Sorry. So obviously, as Brendan described, when he was on the other side of these transactions, investing the money, these are investors who expect a return. And so they put and insist on these frameworks to make sure that when they fund into a bond, that money is not released out until the improvements that it's meant to pay for have been done. So the trustee for the district acts in that capacity on behalf of the bondholders to ensure that their funds aren't released out until the work is complete.
There might be some more nuances, but I just want to make sure that the purchaser is safeguarded, that they can actually close on a home even if a developer goes bankrupt.
Yeah, so that's the important piece here is that the individual home buyer, their encumbrance is removed before they come into title. Just like if you buy a home from someone who had a mortgage. Before you can buy the home, the seller has to pay the mortgage off. So that's the structure here, is that those encumbrances have to be removed before the home builder sells to you as the home buyer.
Thank you.
Senator, I think that's a real important to understand, that debt proportion for that home that's being sold at closing, just like if somebody,
Right.
as he said, had a mortgage that had to be repaid if you're reselling the property, that's got to be retired at time of closing.
Good point. And it would just look like a reconveyance, I would assume. So, all right, jump in.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
We saved the
Christy
best for
Henshaw,
last.
Utah County Republican Party Chair.
Okay.
Special districts have been of special interest to Utah County, and so we have been trying to figure out the ins and outs of these. I do appreciate that this does resolve a lot of the issues that I have had as I have started researching PIDs and what PIDs do, although the fundamental issues that I have is still that we are creating a government entity with a corporation. And so I still struggle with that and the taxation part of a special district. So we're allowing them to become government entities. Historically in Utah, special districts had always been tied to local districts. And so I do appreciate the nod to that, the jurisdiction with the local municipality. However, we're still allowing corporations to become government entities, which is a back end for funding. So for me, we are still creating some sort of a public-private partnership where we are giving them power. And so I think the question that was just brought up is of concern, because in 2018, there were some of these PIDs around the country that did go bankrupt. And so the question being, if we have created a government entity, does that anyway come back on the state? So I guess finally I'd like to say this is a great step back from where the PIDs are. If we could eliminate PIDs, I'd be happy with that. But ultimately, I still think creating government entities with corporations is a form of economic fascism, and I'm not in favor of it. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to close public comment, come back to the committee for further action. Chair Dunnigan, tell me what action you'd like the committee to take.
I'm interested in having this go forward as a committee bill. We have worked for months and months and months with stakeholders trying to get this. We're trying to match the bond issues requirements. So we're putting a mill levy of 0.0004. That's the same as your mosquito tax abatement, at least mine, okay? So we're talking about mosquitoes here. That's what the mill levy is. And I don't see how this can come back on the state. This is a financing tool. The responsibility is limited to the project. It's optional. We're not compelling. It allows a developer to go out. And I ask you, what is your solution to get homes built in our state? What is your solution? Is it to put more state general fund dollars to go out and do it? Why don't we let the private sector do it and get out of the way and let them get access to some capital at a lower cost and build the houses that we need?
Okay, so let's take. Do you want to make a motion, or do you want a committee member to make a motion?
I'll move we adopt this bill as a committee
Okay,
bill.
so that motion is before us. Discussion to that motion. I'm going to leave the chair. I'm going to take just a moment to say that I support that motion. I think to your point, if we don't do this, what is the solution? I look at Eagle Mountain has 27,000 lots that are entitled. Saratoga Springs has 23,000 entitled lots. The issue that I hear in my county repeatedly is infrastructure. How do we fund it? How do we fund it? We all of us, everybody in this room gets hit up by constituents that we need affordable housing. What are you going to do? And I think it comes back to infrastructure is the biggest problem. That's the biggest problem in my area, and I would argue it's probably the biggest problem in most of your areas. So I appreciate the motion. Let's go to other discussion. This looks like Representative Snyder, maybe? Representative Cutler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a really innovative, interesting idea. I believe I support it, but I share some of the concerns that Senator Harper had and want to learn a little bit more. I think I'd encourage passing, but not unanimously.
I think that's fair, and I will say that I've worked with Chair Dunnigan for a long time, as all of you have, and he's spent a lot of time, and I'm guessing he's going to continue to spend a lot of time on this one. Representative Walters.
I just want to speak in support of this bill. I think that
There's been a lot of concern in my communities about PIDs. We've passed some. There's been concern. There's debate about whether they're the right solution. I think this threads a needle that allows access to public markets while simultaneously resolving some of the most acute concerns and complaints that I've heard from both citizens and elected officials about PIDs. So thank you for bringing this before us.
Okay, let's go back to the maker of the motion.
This is a financing tool. We have crafted this so narrowly, it cannot go beyond its borders, okay? The financial responsibility is on the developer. If you go and buy a house, your proportional debt of this is done. You're out, your assessment's through, and then it continues on. As was mentioned, there are tens of billions of dollars of financing throughout the country, and we're not getting our share. We desperately need infrastructure. You know, the comment's been made, well, the city should have approval. If the cities want to approve this, they can. We're taking nothing away from the cities, but generally, many of the cities do not want to incur this debt for the infrastructure, and so those lots are just sitting there. This is a good tool because it keeps it off the balance sheet for the city, but allows the development to go through, and then when it's done, it's all paid for. So let's send this out of committee.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote. Nathan Brady, I'm going to turn on your mic. Thank you, Chair Dunnigan.
Representative Walter. Aye. Representative Tusher. Aye. Representative Snyder. Yes. Representative Lee. Yes. Representative Kyle. Yes. Representative Kohler. No. Representative Gwynn. Yes. Representative Garner. No. Representative Cutler. Yes. Representative Benyon. Yes. Senator Wilson. Aye. Senator Pitcher.
Aye.
Senator Harper. Aye. Representative Dunnigan.
Aye.
Senator McCall.
Aye. Okay, I'm going to 13 to 2. Thank you, Chair Dunnigan. Thank you for all the work on it, and thank you for continuing to work
let
on it.
me say, this is
Yep.
complicated. I know it is, and partly it's complicated because of the desires of everybody else that wants this in there and that. So if you have ideas, suggestions, improvements, I'm open. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Benyon, the time is yours for item number 8 and then item number 9, draft legislation, short-term rental agreements. And I'm going to turn the chair Dunnigan doesn't know this, but I'm going to turn the gavel over to Chair Dunnigan. I need to step out for a few minutes, and if you excuse me, I will be back.
Okay. So this is another complex topic, and you might ask why I'm here to talk about short-term rentals. What brings me of all the legislators here? And it is my constituents. I have constituents that have had homes next door to them turned into short-term rentals with 3 kitchens, trying to rent out 3 rentals from their next door neighbor. I also have constituents who use short-term rentals to stay in their homes. They have a short-term rental in the basement, and they would like to be able to have that income. So this is a complex issue. I also want to share the history that I have with this topic. I ran a bill back in 2022 on this topic, brought to me by one of our planning commissioners from Cottonwood Heights, and I was on the short-term rental working group last interim with Representative Musselman. Because of the bill I had in 2022, I have been in close work with a national expert on this topic. Her name is Julie Davies. She is from Utah. She teaches in our universities how to run short-term rentals properly. She is concerned about abuses that happen within this industry, and that's why we have the need of this bill. Also, last month, I was able to go to a national working meeting on short-term rentals, a conference. So I have tried to understand the complexities of this bill, this issue, and we're just going to go over briefly the current status of short-term rentals nationally and in Utah, and then the proposed bill.
So you can see in this, are you all able to see my presentation? Okay, staff will help me here. I'm presenting on my screen. I'll let staff see what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so short-term rentals, they emerged really in the 1990s when we had the internet starting advertising VRBOs, and then in 2010s we had Airbnb start, and they started within homes renting housing for short-term use. Then in it grew even faster. So these charts are important at this point. So I'll wait till we get them. Okay. Oh, I don't know. Can you share it from where you're at? Okay. Here we go. Okay. And I had it right. They don't have it pulled up there. Sorry, I should have had you. Well, I sent it to the committee. I sent it to you yesterday. Okay. So we'll go ahead. Maybe while he's getting that ready, I'm going to go maybe to some issues that we have with the state that we can talk about before we look. So nationally, as short-term rentals came, we are basically running on a groundwork that is not prepared for them, nationally and at the state level. So some of the things that states have done is in 2016, Arizona preemptively said to their entire state, all the cities, you will have short-term rentals. They will be there. And then what happened is then Arizona had to come back last year in 2022 and give the power back to cities to say, you need to have some tools to regulate short-term rentals so that we can continue to have housing in our communities for people that live there. Because as we all know, one of the graphs I'll show is that in Utah we have 38,000 short-term rentals. And if we talk about a housing shortage, that's about what we're missing. We are not going to take back all of our short-term rentals. That's not going to happen. But we do need to give cities the ability to have it be a healthy business, just like it is for so many other businesses. This is a business, and we want to be able to let them be regulated like any other business. In Utah, we have the bill that makes a significant difference in our state is the not well language from 2000. Oh, good. And now we're all seeing these graphs. Okay. So we've kind of gone through this first one. Let's go to the next one, please. And this one shows that in 2021, there were over 2 million active short-term rentals within the United States with $30 billion of gross revenue, an 88% increase in the number of short-term rentals in the market from the last year, from 2020 to 2021, a huge increase. So that's why we as a state have to be involved, is because the national government is not doing anything, right? So let's go to the next slide. And these slides we're looking at come from the Alliance for Stronger Communities, which is one of the groups where I went at the last conference I was at about short-term rentals. This graph shows again that exponential takeoff from 2013 till now. And we can see the different players, but especially that top 27% is not within the normal platforms. Like so there are platforms that are small, there are people doing it on their own, and that percentage might not be paying their taxes. So I want to point that out now, and we can go to the next slide. Okay, so mostly this is talking about how a lot of these communities have not been tourist destinations. They're not set up to manage such a large influx of rentals that are within residential units largely. And what started as home sharing then has become a commercial activity. And the impacts vary from community to community, and there's a lack of accountability. And now we can go to the next slide. So zoning can help, but not really, because people will still run these short-term rentals even when a community says they're not zoned. I think we all probably have some experience with that. And if we look at the comparison to hotels, they have building codes, fire safety systems, insurance, and clear taxing, and a lot of that is missing for short-term rentals. And then we all know that there can be other community impacts, and we can go to the next slide. So short-term rentals should be able to be regulated like any other business at the state and local level. That's the main thing here. And with taxes, that it's very complex really when we think about taxing, because some of these really are running a business out of their home, but they're making money. But so there should be a homestead exemption, but then definitely not if this is an entire home being used as a short-term rental. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. And this is showing our taxes from the last 5 years, all TRT tax. The state does not break it out, but we can see how it's grown significantly, and many people I've spoken with would say that we are missing millions of dollars in TRT taxes because the businesses are not licensed. Okay, and we can go to the next slide. This is just clarifying that this year Airbnb said again they're going to try even more to have short-term rentals coming out of different bedrooms in the same home. And I want you to think about that. They're trying to run a home as a hotel. So this is not something we want to have happening in our communities. We can go to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, and this is Utah specifically. 38,000 active listings of short-term rentals, $75 million of gross revenue to the state, a growth of 138%, and booms where you can see on the map. I think this is not news to a lot of us, and we can move on. Okay, so this bill has, in this bill, I do not address the 2017 legislation that said to cities, you cannot use the advertisement solely. That was, I've asked Representative Musselman to address that because he was going to address that last year in his bill. So this bill does not address that. It does have 3 goals, and the first one, we can go to the next slide, is transparency. The owner should be required to obtain a local permit. And that should be very clear, even if it's an LLC, that one person is listed and tied to that property. What I'm hearing from Salt Lake City that is in litigation over short-term rentals is that because they lack that, they can't even find out who the owner is. If it's an LLC, they need to list one person from that LLC who is responsible and is tied to that property. And then we already have a sales and tax license to be issued by the state, and any listing or advertisement that offers short-term rentals must include in our state that owner's short-term rental permit number. That's like business should be. And we can go to the next slide. And accountability, that there should be required, if the owner is not operating that short-term rental, they have a local contact within an hour's drive, and that they are limited to 20 short-term rentals. That there are instances around the country that my expert has dealt with. They have unlimited numbers they're responsible for. They're overseas. And how do they get there? They lean on our law enforcement to come in when there's problems. And that should not be how a business is run. And that education courses are required for that owner and the local contact. They are making money as a business. They should have education about how they're running the business. And then the final slide, that there is one reservation for a single rental, okay? So that my neighbors that have 3 kitchens in the house next door, they're trying to run 3 short-term rentals. No, there is one rental per unit. And there's a limit on occupancy, not capped, but for the size of the home, and that there is not any short-term rental in low-income housing. And I am open to working on the details of this bill. I have worked with the Utah Rental Apartment Association. I had apartments in this bill. I have taken them out. So I am willing to work with all parties, and it is time that our state gave some guidance. This is a nonpartisan issue dealing with a big business in our state. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Representative Benyon. To the committee for clarifying questions, Representative, is that Tusher? Oh, just a second, Representative. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Benyon. Just one question on that last point that you had of one rental per building, facility, home, whatever it is. Is there any sort of limit on the size of the home? I mean, if I have a 20,000 square foot home, I could easily have, 2-3 rentals, and that would be legitimate compared to if I had a 1,000 square foot home, then maybe your concerns are more relevant.
And a lot of this, I think, can be dealt with locally. Originally, this bill had a limit of 16 per unit per rental, because in a normal home, that's too much. So we removed that limit. So you could have 50 people in a home if that's, what the home is built for. But one rental per unit is what isn't within this bill.
So to be clear, regardless of the size of my home, I can only have one reservation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Representative Benyon, I'll go to the public, but your intent with this bill today is for information,
Just
is that
for
correct?
information. This is a very complex topic. I don't expect any of you to vote on it today.
Okay, so we're not taking a vote today. Is there anybody from the public that has to speak to this? Okay, we have one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jason Chipman again with the Libertas Institute. We also worked with the working group with Representative Musselman and Representative Benyon last year on this, and we hope to continue working on this as well. There are certain things in this bill that we like, and there are certain things that we don't like, as mentioned by Representative Tusher. Just from my own experience, the way the bill is currently construed, I would have broken the law twice last month had this bill been implemented, because the houses that we stayed in while on vacation, my parents and niece were here, had a bunch of bunk beds to house the 7 children that we had with us. And had we had this been in place, we would have not been able to do that. And for families that have food allergies, going out to eat is not an option. So without vacation short-term rentals, we would not be able to go on vacation, because we can't just go out to eat whenever we want. So there are certain things that we like about it, then there are certain things we don't, and we'd like to continue working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We'll close the public comment period. Representative Benyon, final word.
Yes, I myself have a son with celiac disease. We use short-term rentals. This bill is not about limiting short-term rentals, really. It's about proper regulation. So I'm open, and we'll have further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on this.
Yes.
All right, while you're there, let's go to item number 9, investors in the housing market. We will discuss increasing private investor, or we will discuss the increasing private investment involvement in the Utah housing market and options to address it. Go ahead, Representative Benyon.
Thank you, and thank you, Nathan, for having this one ready for me. So I have been thinking about this. My children are of the age where they're trying to buy homes. Our youngest son now lives in Ohio, where they bought a lovely $400,000 home, and that can't happen in Utah, right? So I think that there are so many pressures on our housing market, and this is one of them. And so I presented this same presentation, basically the same one, back in June to the Commission on Housing Affordability, their policy subgroup. And we want to identify what is an institutional investor. They are making investments on behalf of someone else, a hedge fund, a pension fund. And then I think this statement by the HUD secretary from the first part of this year, institutional investors are reshaping local housing markets and making it more difficult for first-time home buyers to purchase a home. Okay, so this is recognized as an issue nationally. We can go to the next slide. I think there was and we might have the wrong, okay, so this is a slightly different, so I'm going to stop to just read this quote. My thoughts of this have also been shaped by an article in the Deseret News by Valerie Hudson about home ownership. The title of her article back in 2022 was Preventing the New Feudalism in the Housing Market. And I'm just going to read this that she reported from another essay, Surfing the Future, by Joel Kotkin and Wendell Cox, and that unless reversed, young people will be forced into a lifetime of rental serfdom. The assets that drove middle-class stability, wider social benefit, and subsidized comfortable retirements will likely not be available to them. Property remains key to financial security. Homeowners have a median net worth more than 40 times that of renters, according to the Census Bureau. Shoving prospective homeowners into the rental market not only depresses their ambition, but also forces up rents, which hurts poorer households. And so we have also seen that home ownership impacts fertility, right? Many people like to be able to own their own home before they have children. We have seen our fertility rates in Utah plummet to where demographers did not expect them to be for 50 years. There's many reasons for this, but home ownership is a piece of it. And then there's also voters, we're more likely to vote when we own our home. We're more engaged, we're part of the community, we have ownership. So this shows that back in 2000, it was only like 6% of the housing market that was owned by investors. Now it's almost up to 20% and has grown so much, 18% in that year 2020 to 21. We can go to the next. And this, to be clear on these slides, it's not just institutional investors on these slides. But we can see that investors are targeting lower cost housing. They are buying the kind of houses that our children and our teachers and law enforcement would like to purchase. And we can go to the next slide because I know we're on short time. 2 in 5 homes nationally are purchased by investors that would have been starter homes. And the next slide. And these are just going over, I think most of us have seen these figures, how rents have raised 23% nationwide, 40% in some locales, a lot of that here in Utah. 1 in 5 homes bought by an investment firm, and that 15% of families can't purchase a home. They can't afford one. And we can go to the next slide. We can continue to increase the housing stock, but the problem remains if those units are bought or even built by investment firms. And that is happening in Utah, that places are being built by investment firms. Some of them in areas where it's a vacation destination and some not. Okay, and we can go to the next slide. So nationally, and I'm going to ask, Chair, how long do I have?
3 minutes.
Okay, so we're going to go through this very fast. So nationally, we've seen the next slide that we can try to restrict the sales of home, or we can devise ways to let investors let loose of them, and we can go to the next slide. These are just things that are happening nationally. It's such a problem, and again, this article that these are based on is now 1.5 years old. It was printed in 2022 in March. So Cincinnati back then was buying homes and then reselling them to people to keep them out of investors' hands. That's how bad the problem is. We can go to the next slide. Ireland is taking all of these steps. Toronto is restricting the bidding process, and we can go on to the next slide. We could give even higher property tax tier for corporate owners. I don't see our state going to some of these events, like a rent increase cap. I don't think we want to go there. Another slide. California is fining vacant property owners for failure to keep up the property because some of these investors, they have so much money, they have so much inventory that it's not always enough of a incentive to keep that property rented. And we can go to the next slide. Okay. We can reward corporations who participate in rent-to-own programs. We can mandate that the owner must live in the property for a year before it's rented out. We also have the down payment program that we had last year for our state to give $20,000, and we can go to the next slide. Okay, this is missing a little piece that from we had a more recent slide. Salt Lake County is now involved with a firm to go through the assessors to assess how many long-term investors we have within the county. And I also had another slide that wasn't on this version I sent, that we did look at Redfin data, and I'll send the latest slides for the committee to look at. Redfin showed that for institutional investors in Utah, It was only 1.5% of our housing from 2025 to 19, and then it's gone up to almost 2% within the last couple of years. So institutional investors are coming into Utah. It's a small amount right now, but these are investors that have cash. I have somebody to present. And Jim, will you come up very briefly? I have a friend that I met at an event who is going to just briefly share what he has seen.
Thank you. Is it Mr. No?
Yes.
Yes, Jim Go.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Jim Go, and thank you, Representative Benyon, Chair Dunnigan, and members of the committee. I just want to talk to you a little bit about what Representative Benyon and I have discussed. A little bit about my background. I'm a software developer, a software consultant, and I have a software company, a cloud-based software company. And I wanted to quickly just share my background. I am a first-generation immigrant, and my family, and I was born in Vietnam. My family was resettled in Utah in 1975, and believe it or not, in 1975, my parents worked really hard, and in 1980, we were able to buy our first home in just 5 years after coming to this country. Can you imagine that? 5 years. And I'm not sure today if that would be possible. I think it would be pretty impossible to do something like that today. So that's why I'm very, very invested in and interested in this topic, just in my background, and making sure that other immigrants coming to this country and our children. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She wants to be a doctor, and she wants to stay here in Utah, and hopefully she can, and she'll be able to. In my background, I because of that home ownership, when I went to school, I was able to excel in school, and I was able to go to the University of Utah on a presidential scholarship, and I owe a lot of that to my parents' work to achieve our home ownership and having that stability of being in a home. And so that's why I think it's really important to have that available for our kids. Really quickly, my background with software. The large institutional investors, what they have, the tools that they have that none of us have the ability to tap into, is that they have a database of 47 trillion pieces of information, documents, publicly available documents on 150 million parcels, real estate parcels in this country. They tap into that. They are now actively using AI to parse those records and identifying parcels, identifying homes, identifying homeowners, identifying communities in which they can target, and they can go in with cash, make cash offers without any contingencies. And they are targeting very specifically low income or lower income housing. People who are trying to buy against that, they don't stand a chance. And so I think it's a really important topic that Representative Benyon has brought up, that we really have to look at that, the large institutional investor as they are coming into Utah and trying to address that before it becomes a major issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. No. We appreciate that. Representative Benyon?
Yeah, just to close, so I have a bill file open on this topic, and one of the things that Texas looked at is having institutional investors, if they're going to be landlords in our state, that they file with the state so that we can have some transparency and know who our landlords are if they're institutional investors. And I'm also in discussion with some cities about some other ideas about home ownership. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. And is there any from the public? Mr. Cox, do you want to comment? Come on, you can have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I live in Western Utah, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation to come today. I own Empiric Financial.
Go ahead and just give us your name, if you will, please.
Okay. Michael Cox.
Thank you.
I've been in the mortgage industry for nearly 20 years now. And so this is something that I want to speak passionately for, because we have a lot of homeowners that come in and they want to buy homes, and they are having to compete against institutions that they don't have the ability to compete against. For example, in 2015, our federal government passed the TRID laws, which are the TILA-RESP integrated disclosure laws, that require mandatory disclosures, mandatory waiting periods. The fastest a consumer can buy a home if they're going to live in the home is 6 days, and they're competing against corporations with $100 billion dowries, where they can come in and they can offer more than asking price, and they can offer that instantly. I would hope that as we seek some resolutions and some ways to put this bill together, that we keep in mind that we just want everybody to be able to play by the same rules. And we want to be able to keep those institutional investors from being able to outbid the consumers. As we see, we have hundreds of thousands of homes across the United States that are purchased by institutional investors, and we see some of them they're not even American companies. For example, Tricon Residential owns over 40,000 homes, and they're a Canadian company. So we have foreign companies buying American land and renting it back to the American people and profiting off of us with access, as you've heard, to data that the consumer doesn't have. We also have small families that are working very diligently to come up with money down to be able to get into a home. And some of them are working multiple jobs. Some of them are selling assets to be able to come up with a down payment. And they are doing everything they can to buy a small home, and they're getting outbid by these corporations. So a couple of ideas that popped up in my head is obviously following what other legislators are doing. There's a lot of states around the country already doing it. Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona have all introduced bills this year, so we can look into what they're doing. Potentially having a mandatory waiting period for a corporation, so they have to be on the same timeline, and encouraging I apologize, one last thing, encouraging a media campaign so the public understands the benefits of selling to homeowners rather than selling to corporations. So
thank you, Mr. Cox. Thank you, Mr. Null. Thank you for making the effort to come and join us today. Okay, we'll go to our last item on the agenda, item number 10, County Recorder Standards Report. Mr. Steinagel. Rochelle Hobbs.
Yes.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Rochelle Hobbs, Salt Lake County Recorder. I serve as chair for the Standards Board. With me today is our vice chair, Chad Montgomery, with Box Elder County Recorder. And then also with me is Paul Newton with ULTA. We appreciate this opportunity, and I understand that we're limited on time, so I'll have our vice chair go over our recommendations for this board.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, Chad Montgomery, Box Elder County Recorder and Vice Chair of the County Recorder Standards Board. Just to be very brief, the board has discussed 5 different standards that has been approved and put into place. 3 of those deal with name discrepancies when they come on a document and how to handle those. 1 is dealing with blended notaries for remote online notary, and the last one was when property is held in trust and how to deal with those. In the process of those discussions, we came across a difference in 2 different statutes that had the definition of acknowledgement. And an acknowledgement is very important for the documents that we deal with. And so when we met with Business and Labor, we talked to them about that discrepancy and how to fix that so that the definition was consistent. That's basically everything that our board deals with, is how to be consistent with how we handle things. And so as we did that, it was 46 and 57, and we like the version in 57 with the little tweaks. And so that's what we recommended to them for a committee bill, and that's our very brief report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of our committee? Okay. I do see one. It's Representative Tusher. I got you.
Awesome. No, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the report. I know it was brief, and I love having you guys come back in. I just one question. Do you feel like the board is functioning right, that the makeup is right? I mean, this is the first year the board's been in operation. Are there any tweaks to how the board is operating to make you more efficient in what you're doing?
Appreciate that, Representative Tischer. We do. We appreciate the opportunity to meet together, appreciate your support with this. And currently the meetings are ongoing and they're beneficial conversations. So I would say yes, and I would assume Chad would agree with me, our vice chair.
Yes.
Yes. We like the partnership with the industry, and we like the interactions that we're able to have, so appreciate your support.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank
all your
you.
efforts.
Thank you, Representative.
Okay, thank you. Let me just wrap up this meeting. Thank you to our committee. We have staff. You're our team members. We couldn't do it without you. We had a lot of meaty issues during interim. We've got 6 or 7 committee bills that have come out. So thank you for all that you did. And Chair Dunnigan has made a final motion to adjourn. It's non-debatable. Is there, with that, all those in support of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I'll rule that passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you.